evening, everyone, and welcome to the Gwinnett County Public Library's Author Talk. My name is Kari Evans, and I'm the Director of Branch Services for the library. And our organizer, Gina DuVernay, is not able to be here today, but she wanted me to say thank you for coming and hope that you will be super excited about tonight's event. And I'm excited to tell you about tonight's author and moderator. So we have Katie Mitchell, and she is a storyteller and bookseller. She lives, works, and writes in Atlanta. Her online and pop-up Black bookstore, Good Books, has been featured in the New York Times, NBC, NPR, PBS, and many other outlets. Go ahead. And Katie is a Dorothy Porter Wesley Fellow. Now, moderating the talk will be Chandra Walker. Chandra serves as the Dean of the University Library at Georgia College in Milledgeville, where she is also a professor of library science. Oh, okay, all right. She earned a PhD in educational leadership from Mercer University and holds degrees from HCBU's Clark Atlanta University and Spelman College. Chandra is co-editor of The Black Librarian in America, Reflections, Resistance, and Reawakening. So please help me welcome Katie and Chandra to discuss Prose to the People.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. So let's jump right in. Tell us, what is Prose for the people, and why did you write it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And Prose to the People is, I described it when I was pitching it to my publisher as a road trip companion to Black bookstores across the United States. And it's broken down into 5 sections, each representing a region of the United States, but we also go all the way back to the 1830s. So I've added a time machine also to that definition. And I wrote it because I saw how impactful and transformative Black bookstores have been for me. And I see them as transformative as the Black church or the Black college, but I found that they were understudied. And I found it deeply ironic that the story of the Black bookstore hadn't been told in book form, because they hold our histories, but we haven't told their histories until now.
All right, so before we start talking about the book, I have to talk about the book because the book is gorgeous. I love the way you have all the archival photos, the images, all of that, as well as the different fonts and colors, and just the layout itself is really captivating. Can you tell us a little bit about your choices or why you decided to use the imagery that you did?
I wanted Prose to feel like a Black bookstore. So when you go into a bookstore, well, one, you're not just hearing from one author, so that's why it's in an anthology. I have a lot of different voices in there, from Nikki Giovanni, Kiese Lehman, and then 2, it's very vibrant. You're seeing a lot of different pictures. The covers of the books capture your eye. There's different genres in the bookstore, so you'll have essays and poetry, just like in Prose. So I wanted Prose to the People to feel like the Black bookstore, and that led a lot of my decisions. And my research process just showed me just this treasure trove of visual history that I couldn't not share with my reader. So I found ephemera, you'll see like flyers, FBI files, all very interesting things that I think tell the story in a way that just text couldn't. It was a good supplement, I thought.
Gotcha. All right, so you touched on this a little bit, but I noticed that the book is organized into sections by areas of the country. Tell us a little bit about your organizational choice or why you chose to organize that way.
I played with a couple of different choices. At first, I was saying like, oh, I want it to be the feminist bookstores and the movement bookstores. But I found that when I go and travel, I'm always looking for the Black bookstore. And I was thinking about the reader experience when they pick up Prose and they know that they're going to be in California next week. They can go and say, okay, let me see where I'm going to add to my itinerary. So that was a big thought process in the choice of the organization. And then also, I wanted to show the family tree of Black bookstores. And just because the stores aren't close to each other, they're not connected. So I also wanted the reader to make the connection that, store in California is out here helping a store in Georgia, and show how the institution is so wide-reaching.
Gotcha. All right. So one of the things that you discuss in the book is this definition of these distinctions among Black bookstores. So there's a bookstore, there's a Black-owned bookstore, and this one may be similar to the other two, but the movement bookstore. So tell us a little bit about the differences among Black bookstores.
Yeah, so she's referring to the introduction. I give the definition to kind of orient the reader on what am I talking about in this book. So I say that I am writing about Black bookstores, and I define that as bookstores that specialize in Black publications as opposed to being merely Black owned. And I take that definition from Rosemary M. Stevenson, who has an unpublished manuscript about Black bookstores. And that came to me from Paul Coates, who is a former Black Panther. He had a bookstore in Baltimore in the 1970s, and he's also Ta-Nehisi Coates' father. And when I was speaking to him, he asked me how am I defining Black bookstores for this project, and that really helped me narrow the scope of Prose so that I can focus on bookstores that were intentional about uplifting Black literature and focusing on literacy in the Black community. Because of course there's Black bookstores that are owned by Black people, but they can be general bookstores. They can have, all books in there, which I do think is great, but wasn't the focus of Prose to the People. And then movement bookstores, I think, are just more of a subsection of Black bookstores. Mm-hmm. So when I think of movement bookstores, I'm thinking of Drum and Spear, which was a Black bookstore in 1960s DC that was founded the same year that the FBI added Black bookstores to their COINTEL program. And being in DC, they were right in Hoover's FBI's backyard and were definitely harassed and surveilled in that way. So movement bookstores I see is just another subset of Black bookstores.
Gotcha. So this question kind of follows up on that one. You mentioned that Black bookstores bloom and blossom in response to tumult. Do you feel that Black bookstores are currently making a renaissance, and if so, why?
Yeah, I definitely do think so. Starting back from the first Black bookstore that we know of, which is D. Ruggles Books, which was in 1834, Black bookstores have been at the vanguard of social movements in this country. So we have the abolitionist movement, we have the civil rights movement, we have the Black Power movement, and now we have the movement for Black lives. And what we find is that these bookstores are places where activists and where just concerned citizens can go and learn together and be in community around these books and learn about, how did people in the past deal with the oppression that we're facing now. And so I definitely have seen the rise of Black bookstores in the 2020s through the Black Lives Matter movement. And, it's a similar pattern, right? And I think it's interesting learning from my elders, but then also hearing people my age who own bookstores like, oh, I had no idea that this was something that happens, every generation. So I think being oriented in our place in history is also very important.
All right. Can you speak to Black bookstores' relationships with other institutions such as schools, libraries, and political organizations?
Definitely. And also churches.
Yes.
I see Black bookstores coming out of those organizations a lot. People who are really active in the church or really active in HBCUs especially, you can see them say, hey, we need a bookstore in this area. In Atlanta, the Shrine of the Black Madonna is also it's a church and a bookstore. Started in Detroit and then came down to Atlanta in 1975. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. But you can definitely see people who are part of other institutions wanting the Black bookstore to be an institution and working really hard to make that happen. And then currently, these institutions support Black bookstores. So Spelman, Clark, Morehouse, the AUC, there's a bookstore right across the street from them, and you can see them working together to uplift the bookstore, and then the bookstore being a place where students can gather off campus, be in community with an elder who is interested in their well-being too. So I love that relationship.
All right. So in addition to the beautiful histories of the bookstores, you also interweaved firsthand accounts from individuals who patronized them or knew their owners. How did you identify those individuals?
It was like a rabbit hole. I didn't know all of them at first. So there's one woman named Dr. Jasmine Johnson. She is the granddaughter of the founders of the oldest Black bookstore in the country right now, which is Marcus Books in Oakland. And I, just reached out to the owners, which are the children of the founders. And they're like, oh, you should really talk to my niece and my daughter. Like, she's so smart. And I was like, I want to talk to you. But they're like, talk to Jasmine, talk to Jasmine. So Jasmine's a professor at UPenn. And when I was speaking to her, I was like, I said, are you saying a poem right now? Because she was just that eloquent and just well-spoken and just had the history and the feeling of the bookstore in that way. So it's just supposed to be an interview. But what she said to me was so interesting. I said, do you want to write an essay for the book? And that's how I ended up identifying her. So it's those kind of moments where I just let it happen, There are some people that I definitely knew that I wanted to have in the book and reached out to them. Nikki Giovanni being one, Kiese Lehman being one. But then in other ways, I was just letting it come to me and seeing who had a story to tell.
All right. So, of course, your main focus was like brick and mortar bookstores, but you also highlighted the work of the Free Black Women's Library, and you also talked about the Sister Sci-Fi book vending machine. Mm-hmm. So these expansions of traditional bookstore concept, what are your thoughts about those? Like, do you feel like the brick and mortar is most important, or are we open to variations of the Black bookstore concept?
Yeah, I think brick and mortar has its space, but then those variations too. And, rent is high. So, and one of the things that is a barrier to Black bookstores when they do get there is keeping up with the rent. And so I do think the Sister Sci-Fi vending machine is very cool, and it's a way to make these books more accessible to people. So when I went out to Oakland, the vending machine was in a coffee shop, a Black-owned coffee shop, and I saw people like coming up to it, really excited about it. So, I think it would be nice for her to have a brick and mortar and to do the vending machines. And then for the Free Black Women's Library, they're not a bookstore, but they work on the swap model or the trade model, where you go in, you have a book that's made or written by a Black woman author, and then you can take a book like that, kind of like the free library concept, but in a building. And then I also talk about No Name's Radical Hood Library, that's also not a bookstore, but she is doing like book clubs with folks who are incarcerated, so people on the inside and on the outside talking to each other and being in dialogue around these books. Mm-hmm. So I love all the ways people are, getting literature out there, getting prose to the people, if you will.
Cool. Okay, so what I noticed about the book was you talked a lot about how Black bookstores function as community spaces. Mm-hmm. And so they pull people in. Can you expand upon that a little bit, or maybe there are some examples from the book that you like to share?
Yeah, I think Drum and Spear, I always come back to them. They were the preeminent Black bookstore in the 1960s DC, and they not only had the bookstore, they had the radio program, they had a clinic, they had a satellite bookstore in the health and welfare. They changed the names of these buildings, but so they were a group that I think really showed what building community through literature could do. And then I do think that is why they were so surveilled and harassed. So when you see these Black bookstores really building community, you flip the page and you're like, and then the police, firebombed them, or then their store was set on fire. Both things happening to Drum and Spear, also happening in Detroit at Vaughn's bookstore, being a place where people can gather and speak and learn together, but the state seeing that as a threat, especially when Black people are doing it.
All right, so one of the things that you highlighted in the book was the bond between Black authors and Black bookstores. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the specific function that the Black bookstores have served for Black authors in particular?
Yeah, I think in addition to the cycles of booms and busts with Black bookstores, you see that with authors as well. So I'd say pre-1990s, the Black bookstores were kind of the only place Black authors could get their books in. And then that kind of changed with Terry McMillan. when her success was super mainstream and everybody wanted her book. So you see, even Nikki Giovanni, when she first started, was at small Black presses and then in Black bookstores. And what happens is the Black bookstores are highlighting these authors and having book parties, and everyone's super excited. And then the white bookstore comes and it's like, oh, let's have this display and let's have the books cheaper in our store, kind of what you see what Amazon does. So I think that is super important. We talk about it a lot in Prose. There's stories, just like every store, I didn't put it in every profile, but every store kind of had that story. Is like, and then they came and just copied our display and undercut us in that way. But I love that relationship, and I think we see it being fostered now too, especially with authors trying to make their own way, whether self-publishing or being at smaller presses, getting their books out there and a way through those Black bookstores.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was really surprised to learn that Black bookstores had functioned also as Black presses for Black authors. That's something that as a librarian, I'm familiar with some of the Black presses and how they have helped to supply libraries with books, but I was totally unfamiliar with the concept of Black bookstores serving as presses. Can you talk about that a little bit more, especially in terms of telling Black stories? I know there was a story in the book about a Black woman who had written a children's book, and she was looking for a publishing outlet. So can you talk about that function of Black bookstores? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that they also did that for Black authors.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to being a movement store. So the movement stores were very cognizant of the importance of having your own way to put out your own information. They didn't want to have to go through someone else to get their information to the community. So you see that with Drum and Spear having its own press. Marcus Books started as a printing press called Success Printing. And I talk about Liberation Bookstore in Harlem. She didn't have a press, but she worked a lot with small presses and said she was really concerned about the big publishers not putting out certain stories because they want to control what is out there and by and about Black people. So yeah, the movement bookstores were very keen on that. I have an interview with Paul Coates asking him like, what happened? But again, when publishers see what is profitable, they take that, and the bookstores kind of focus more on selling the books instead of getting their own messages out there.
So as we see books about the Black experience and by Black authors being challenged and banned, what do you feel is the role of the Black bookstore?
Yeah, the bans are interesting. I think the role of Black people in general is to not comply to these bans. You are not going to go to jail for reading The Color Purple. But even though it's banned, you have to know, I still have agency to read this book. I'm, not beholden to these bans. And then also for the booksellers, I think educating the customers or people in their community and having a space where people can read and learn together, especially with different concepts that are counter to what we've been taught, whether through our formal education or just in society. Sometimes it's hard to grapple with these things on our own, and we need a reading buddy, an accountability partner, a book club, so we can bounce ideas off of each other and learn, because it's like, yeah, the books are banned and I'm reading this banned book, but it's not really helpful if you don't understand it. Right. So really being together in that way too, I think is super important.
So tell us, I know you covered a lot of territory geographically, a long time period. What was your favorite bookstore or your favorite story that you researched for this book?
I feel like I have my categories of favorites. So I think my favorite bookstore, maybe overall, is National Memorial African Bookstore, which was in Harlem. He's seen as like the preeminent bookseller, and he was actually the first bookseller that I found that was on the FBI's radar, way before COINTELPRO. He had all these like witty sayings, and I was talking about the new library that's coming up, and you were saying that there'll be newspaper, like the vintage newspapers there. And so a lot of the Black bookstores were only talked about in the black newspapers, but he was talked about in both. And the white newspapers could not stand him. And I was reading those articles, and they were calling him like a aggressive leprechaun, and they were just really going in on him. But I was like, you know, he was doing something if they were talking bad about him like this. So I like him. His store was Malcolm X's home bookstore. So when you see those pictures of Malcolm X like on the street talking to people in Harlem, it's often in front of that bookstore. So I think he might have been my favorite overall. And then the one that's currently open was Marcus in Oakland. I loved going there. The energy there was so great. I went in there and there's like a former mayor coming in and people with babies, and it was just really nice. There was, the day I came, there were people that sell books in DC coming in, and I was like, Derek, what you doing here? Like, it was just that type of vibe where everyone was like coming in and just having a really great time. So I'll give those two as examples of my favorites, but I have more.
Okay. I guess a final question for me would be, I noticed in the book the centrality of Black women to these Black bookstore stories. So when you start out at the very beginning of the book, you're talking about some of the abolitionist work and the connection to literature, but you really see Black women being front and center in a lot of these stories, sometimes working in Black bookstores and then deciding like, hey, I like this, but I think I want to do something different. I want to go out on my own. Could you kind of talk about the role of Black women to this work? I know that in my work as a librarian, they've been very central to collecting work, of building collections and serving communities. And I found it very interesting to see that same thing running through the Black bookstores as well.
Yeah, so you often see couples, married couples, a man and woman doing stores, or a woman is working in a man's store and then she's like, let me do my own thing. So one of the examples of that is Madhu Bookstore in Atlanta, which is in Greenbrier Mall. She used to work at a store called Hakeem's, which was on MLK, and she worked with him for several years. And what she found was that the people that were coming in were like very intellectual, like politicians, which is great. But she said she wanted to have a bookstore where everybody felt welcomed, people who might not see themselves as readers, or, you know, I've heard the term like reluctant reader come up. So she was trying to cater to people like that. And when I went to the store and went to the events, I was like, yeah, I can see like the whole range of readers coming in. And I do think that's really important to have people who are cognizant of that too, and not make reading this, you know, classes or, oh, only people with degrees can come in this store. Like, you have to know everything. You have to read Walter Rodney and all of Toni Morrison. Like, no, you can come in and get in where you fit in, read what you want to read, and then grow from there. So I think Black women have been really excellent about that.
Thank you. So now I think we will take questions.
I wanted to echo what you said at the beginning. This book is beautiful.
Thank you.
It's like you're not reading a book, but looking through a scrapbook or your book, and just the layout and everything, and the poetry sprinkled throughout it. It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
What Black writers would you recommend? Who are your favorites to read?
Black writers. My favorites, I love the classics like Zora Neale Hurston. Their Eyes Were Watching God was my first favorite book. George Schuyler, he has a book called Black No More, which was written, I believe, in the 1920s, but feels like it could have been written yesterday. Very funny book to me. Toni Morrison, I definitely recommend. I also think she's one of those people that is good to read in community with people, in a book club. The Black Book is a book she edited, which if you look at that, you can see the influence that she had on Prose to the People as far as, like you said, the scrapbook and the collage images. So that's definitely one I think you should check out too. Oh, okay.
Prose to the People, excellent book, love it so much. One of the themes that I've noticed since we are here at the library is that librarians show up in the book. I believe Glendorlin Johnson was a librarian. Schomburg turned into a library. There's maybe one of the ones in California, either she started off as a librarian and her work became a library, but I was wondering if you could speak to the role of libraries.
Yeah, that is a good point. So he's referring to Glendorlin Johnson. She had a bookstore called Black Books Plus. she was a Schomburg librarian before she started the bookstore. And her profile, she was one of the ones that I want to say was my favorite, because she was the favorite one to write. She's from Harlem, but she doesn't like that people call it Harlem. She's like, back in my day, it was called Hamilton something. And she's like, in her 80s, like very old school New York. And I learned about her because the Schomburg had acquired her archive. And I told them like, oh yeah, I'm working on this project about Black bookstores. They're like, oh, that's interesting, because we just acquired a Black bookseller's archive. I was like, well, who is it? They're like, we can't tell you. And I was like, y'all better tell me who it is. So, they took me to the side and whispered who it was. I got in contact with her. I emailed her. I was like, hey, give me your phone number. I'll call you and interview you. And she was like, no, you give me your phone number. I'll call you. She was like very distrusting. I was like, okay, girl. But we grew this amazing friendship. Now, every time I'm in New York, I go see her. We get tea, we get lunch, and she showed me her archive that she sold to the Schomburg. She let me go through it before she gave it to him, which was really helpful, because for folks who have been in archives, it takes a long time for them to process it, and they will not let you see it before they process it. So that was really helpful for getting that information in the book. And this picture that I made one of the title pages is actually from her archive. So this is Walter Mosley standing in front of Black Books Plus. And yeah, that was a picture that I wouldn't have access to if she hadn't let me see it first. But yeah, librarians do show up a lot. And I think, of course, the similarities are very obvious. Another one being Mamie Clayton. She had an antiquarian bookstore in LA, the West Adams neighborhood. And then her bookstore became a research center and then onto a museum. So a lot of synergies there.
Hey, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for doing this work and for just capturing this important history and these important moments. I think on the topic of scrapbooks and archives, I'm wondering, how are you seeing Prose to the People as an archive within itself, and what are you hoping that future generations will get out of engaging with it?
Yeah, thank you for that. I've already seen some things happening. People are really excited about documentaries and using Prose to the People as, the foundation for that. But I would love to see people take it further. I'm always getting questions why isn't this store profiled or that store profiled? It's like, this is, just the first one, but I would love to see it continue and people, add to that story, because there's infinite stories that could be told, not just about Black bookstores, but just Black literary spaces. So I'd be really excited to see Prose kind of bloom in that way too. Thank you.
I haven't actually read the book yet. I was just I saw it on Instagram. It's someone that shared it or something. And so I was like, oh my goodness, you're gonna be in Snellville. And I live in Snellville, so I haven't read it. I was waiting to buy it here. But I'm really excited. And I do have the Black book. So now that you said that, it does remind me kind of that feel, but just looking at it. But yeah, I'm excited to read it. And then the references, from Oakland and all the different places. I'm from Oakland, but I've been here for 18 years, but I'm still from Oakland. I don't claim Snellville like that, but yeah, I'm excited.
Have you been to Marcus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been forever though, but yeah. So when you were talking about it, it just reminded me of home and how much I love the bookstore. I've always loved the bookstore. So to see more bookstores coming up and people, doing more bookish things, it's not a fad. It's just, it feels like people are catching on now finally, So yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
You mentioned that about the drum and spear and the FBI, and I'm not one bit surprised. And then you mentioned the other one. Is this something that happens a lot? That government intervention into the bookstores? Did you see it more than just a couple of times?
Yeah, and I do think it is kind of time boxed in a way. Possibly going on now, but we wouldn't, figure that out until later.
Never hear it on the news.
Right, exactly. But so there are some stores, and it wasn't just the FBI, it wasn't just the federal government. Sometimes it was local police, sometimes it was both, National Guard, harassment. there's was a bookstore in Buffalo called Afro-Asian Bookshop and the founder was named Martin Solstry, and he was Black Muslim, so the police called him Martin X, and he was framed for selling heroin and sentenced to 31 to 41 years in prison by an all-white jury. But his real crime was selling books. Yeah, and we see, we think about contraband, you would think about alcohol or guns or drugs. But in the United States, we find that the contraband for Black people is books. So the crime is selling books. The crime is getting Black people together in this way to feel empowered. So he's just one example. Vaughn's bookstore, Edward Vaughn had a bookstore in Detroit. He spent the last years of his life in Atlanta, so I got to know him and his family. During the rebellions in Detroit, his store was firebombed and flooded. Again, Drum and Spear. The first bookstore, D. Ruggles Books, was a victim of arson. No one claimed responsibility, but there definitely is a pattern, and it's more than just a couple, for sure.
Ban the guns, not the books.
Yes, put that on a t-shirt.
I was wondering if, to follow up on the library question, if you could talk about some of the time you spent in libraries working on Prose and different libraries or collections that were helpful to you.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book in DeKalb Public Libraries. I was in there so often that whenever I walked in, they just get the room ready, It's like really great being in a library, just focused, and writing about bookstores was very helpful. But then in addition to the public libraries, I was at Emory Rose Library, which has a really great collection of Black book history, Black literature. They have Daphne Muse's papers. She worked at Drum and Spear, and they have Michael Lomax's papers. He's Pearl Clegg's ex-husband, so he had a lot of stuff about the Shrine of the Black Madonna because Pearl Clegg's father founded the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And then I spent time at the Schomburg in Harlem, which is just like the Black research library. So that was really helpful, especially with the New York history piece. I got a fellowship to go up there, so that changed the course of the book and really made New York a really big presence in the book. And then I just was randomly in the Newberry Library in Chicago and was like, hey, I'm working on this. And they just showed me like so much stuff. I was like, you gotta love librarians, like have no appointment, never said nothing to them before. And they're like, here you go. So librarians, are a huge part of making the book happen. Did you have a question?
You mentioned earlier at the beginning something about someone having a mobile sort of bookstore, and you said something about little lending libraries and stuff. What kind of like unique stores did you encounter? Like, has the format of the bookstore changed at all? Like that you experienced because you go like over a long period of time. Like, what was the most kind of like interesting like innovation you've seen in bookstores, and like was it related somehow to it being a Black bookstore?
Yeah, so one thing that I found when I was in New Orleans, I was just going to different historical societies and was like, hey, do you know about any Black bookstores in this city before? And so they told me something like, oh, they had notion stores. And so I think David Ruggles' bookstore would be considered like a notion store now because notions? Yeah, so I think now we would call it like a concept shop, basically. This is like the little cutesy stores that just have like random stuff in it. So I think that is one way that bookstores existed kind of in the 1800s, and it's kind of coming back in a way because people are like, I can't pay my rent just selling books, so I'm going to have T-shirts and I'm going to have incense and stuff like that. So it's kind of making like a full circle movement. And I also see bookstores including like coffee shops in them now, which I was talking to a lady last week, and she said like 30 years ago she saw that and it was like mind-blowing to her to see a bookstore with a coffee shop, and now it's kind of commonplace because people love their coffee. You can sit around and read your book. So yeah, in New Orleans there's Baldwin & Co. that has a coffee shop, and when I was in there people were buying that coffee, and I was like, where's the book buying? And then Mahogany in Maryland, they have a coffee shop in there. So so yeah, I see people kind of doing something to, offset the rent in that way. And then there's another bookstore called Adane in Brooklyn. She focuses on like workshops. And so they'll be making incense or making candles or, doing womb work. And then for the ticket price, she'll include a book related to that workshop. So people coming in to, learn a skill, and then she'll, slide the book in there like, oh, and come back, we sell books too. So kind of doing those things to make it work.
Really appreciate you coming out to Snellville, Gwinnett County Public Library. We have a room for you too.
Okay.
But thank you so much, and let's give them a round of applause.